Hello, my name is Alison Strachan and I run the bindery at Shepherd's. I'm also director of the courses programme and I'm delighted to introduce our new set of online tutorials featuring our City and Guilds bookbinding courses. This first video is for the complete beginner and features our new publication, The Art of the Book, which is a textbook on the first principles of bookbinding. The Art of the Book takes the form of a flat sheet of paper, much like any other printed book when fresh off the printing press. The difference is that here you will be learning to bind your own textbook. Remember, you can use blank paper to follow this exercise by following the Art of the Book instructions on our website. You will also be able to order your own copies of The Art of the Book. One of our reasons for presenting the Art of the Book in this way is to demonstrate the principle of imposition. Imposition is a printer's term for arranging pages on a sheet, so once folded into a book, the pages will run in sequence. In this case, pages 1 to 16. Commercial printers have the software to arrange the pages for you, but understanding the principle of imposition is essential when choosing the dimensions and type of paper you want to use and the size of the finished book. This will become more apparent as you continue with this exercise. Secondly, and most importantly, you must also consider the grain direction of the paper and all the materials used in the binding process. The basic rule is that all materials that go together to make a book, paper, cloth and board, must have their grain running from top to bottom in the finished binding. This rule is very important. Books lie flatter and open better when the grain runs from head to tail. Think of it like this. Looked at under a microscope, the fibres of a material such as paper or board look a bit like logs floating down a river. To illustrate this in another way, we have glued these matchsticks together to demonstrate the same point. The fibres which make up a piece of paper or board behave in exactly the same way as this model. Note that there's much greater resistance to bending against the grain than across it. It's exactly the same with this sheet of paper. You will find more information on grain direction on page 6. Read this part first and check out for yourself the grain direction of this sheet. Remember, you can use blank paper to follow this exercise by following the Art of the Book instructions on our website. Mylyn McColl is now going to take us through this exercise.
Hello, my name is Mylyn McColl and I teach Level 1 City and Guilds bookbinding classes at Shepherd's. This video is the first in a series of online tutorials based on our City and Guilds courses in bookbinding. It's aimed at complete beginners and forms part of the first module in the City and Guilds Level 1 award. More information can be found on City and Guilds courses on our website. Firstly, the tools. We have a cutting mat, which is a self-healing cutting mat. We have bookbinder shears, which are made from forged steel and are perfect for cutting through paper and cloth. We have a sharp cutting tool, either a snap-off blade or a scalpel, which we use with a safety ruler, which has a guide down here to keep your fingers nice and safe. We have a cobbler's knife or flat knife, which is used for tearing paper and cloth. We have the humble bone folder used for scoring, folding and rubbing down surfaces. We've got the needles, which are big enough to take the bookbinder's linen thread. We have the bodkin or awl or pricker, and the paste brush, which has a nice rounded head used for pasting out and gluing out.
One of the great joys of bookbinding is the chance to explore the vast range of decorative and colourful materials available as book coverings. Book cloth comes in a rich variety of textures and colours, Covering papers are available in patterns and designs from manufacturers across the world. Contemporary pattern papers, Japanese decorative papers, and traditional marble papers all make wonderful covering materials. In part 2 of this video, Mylyn McColl will take us through the first stages in this exercise. You will find more information on the tools and materials on our website. Folding the paper into sections and sewing them together with a needle and thread has been the basis on which books have been made since ancient times. This sheet of paper, the art of the book, will make a one-section binding, also known as a pamphlet or single-section binding. If you are following this exercise with blank paper, make sure the sheet is short-grained. That is, the grain of the paper is running with the short edge of the sheet. You can see this for yourself by testing in which direction there is greater resistance to bending. Stage 1. Folding the text.
So we're going to take this flat sheet and turn it into our folded section. To do that, you're going to find page number 7, which has got all the folding instructions on it. And it's important to read that through first, because when you start folding, that will actually be hidden. And we've put these little markers on the pages so that you can line up where your folds go. So we've got an asterisk that's going to meet an asterisk, and then on the other side we've got a dagger that's going to meet a dagger. So the first thing to do is get your asterisks folded over, nice and neat, corner to corner, so those two asterisks meet.
Mylyn folds the paper in half again, this time with the daggers meeting, so that page 4 is facing page 5. With a broad-faced knife, she slits along the second fold to just beyond the halfway mark. This will prevent the paper creasing when the paper is folded a third time. Finally, the sheet is folded again, so that page 8 faces page 9. The instructions continue on page 8, which is now in the centre of the folded booklet.
So our flat sheet is now starting to look like a book.
Stage 2. Attaching the end papers.
Before we do the sewing, we're going to apply our end papers around the outside. In our booklet here, it says we're going to take one folded sheet. I'm going to just add an additional sheet so that we've got an extra leaf of coloured paper on either side. But the principle is exactly the same. So we're going to take one folded sheet and wrap it around the outside. And of course the grain direction of this paper is running with the spine. And I'm going to just take a second sheet and pop that around as well. We're also going to apply a spine lining. This is a piece of mull, and it's going to overlap onto the end papers by about 15 millimeters or 5/8 of an inch. And that's just going to come around the outside here, and it sits just short of the overall length.
A good tip is to keep the end papers and mull in place with 2 paper clips. Stage 3. Sewing and trimming.
Okay, so now we're going to pre-make the holes ready for our sewing.
Mylyn prepares the book for sewing by using her bodkin to make 3 holes in the centre fold between pages 8 and 9. The positions are marked with 3 red crosses. If working with blank paper, place 1 hole in the middle and the other 2 evenly spaced on either side.
That centre, pull it round and then push through until it comes right out on the centre of the spine. And the third hole exactly the same. So I'm sort of twisting and wriggling, pushing it through. Okay, so now we're going to do the sewing. So I've got my needle and thread ready here. I'm going to start in the middle hole, coming in from the middle out onto the spine, and we're going to leave enough that we can tie a knot with, so a few centimetres. We're going to come down to the next hole, pull that, and then we're going to go back into the middle hole and just making sure you're not threading through the thread, so just coming through next to the original thread, pulling that tight and into the third hole.
To complete the sewing, Mylyn tightens the sewing by pulling the ends of the thread together and tying them together in a double knot. Take care to position the knot over the centre hole. The ends can now be trimmed off with 10mm to spare. With the point of a bone folder, press the knot down into the centre hole. This will help conceal the knot and prevent it from undoing. She now removes the paper clips. By flicking through the margins of the paper, Mylyn first determines how far in the text block she has to trim to obtain a nice clean cut.
And you'll find that where we folded it, there's probably a slight discrepancy of where the pages stop here. So we want to cut a nice straight line.
Using the squares in her cutting mat to line up her book is an easy way to ensure she keeps her book square when trimming the edges. She uses an aluminium safety rule and a sharp scalpel knife to trim the edge by making a series of shallow cuts. Be careful not to press too hard with a knife, and always use a safety rule when cutting materials in this way.
We're then going to do exactly the same on the head and the tail. So again, I'm just going to sort of lift up my end paper, find that dotted line, pop a little pencil mark as a guide for me, and then using the grids on the mat to help me find a nice square.
By turning the book over, Mylyn repeats the same process on the bottom edge to complete the trimming process. By flicking through the text, she is able to check that she is happy that the book block is trimmed evenly and the three edges are all square. Finally, she trims up the mull by cutting the end of it at an angle, and she is now ready to move on to the next stage of making the cover.
So that's the text block done. The next thing we're going to do is make the case, and the case is designed to protect the text blocks. So to do that, we're going to have grey board around the outside, and we've determined the grain direction of the grey board, and again the grain direction is running with the spine.
The cover boards must allow a 5mm square at head, tail and foredge, and an inset of 5mm at the spine to allow space for the hinge.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare ourselves a little gauge that's going to go between the two boards. So when we come to glue the boards out, we know exactly how far away they need to be. So to do that, I'm going to get my text block on the boards exactly as we want them to sit. So with that even square all the way around, and get the second board on top. And you're going to hold that nicely securely into place. And if you need to, you can take a bulldog clip to help keep that into place. And you're going to take a scrap of cloth and pop it around the middle of the spine here, and we're just going to put a little pencil mark on the edge of the board on that side and on the edge of the board on that side.
Mylyn cuts a strip of board the width of the gap. This will act as a gauge when gluing the boards in place.
I'm just going to make a note that that is my gauge, so I don't accidentally throw it in the bin. Okay.
Bookbinding cloths come in a wide range of colours and finishes. Today, Mylyn is using our standard range with a paper lining to prevent the penetration of glue to the outside. She has cut a piece of book cloth wide enough to cover the gap and overlap the boards by about 30mm. The length of the cloth must also allow a 15mm turn-in at head and tail.
So now we can glue the cloth spine into place. So we can remove the boards and the spacer to one side, and we're going to take a bit of waste paper, pop that underneath, And for this exercise, we're going to use EVA, which is a type of PVA. You've also got starch paste available, which has a slightly more longer drying time, which can be used for other things. But for what we're doing today, the EVA works really well. Start in the middle and work our way out.
Working from the centre outwards, Mylyn uses vigorous, decisive strokes with her glue brush to get an even coating across the surface of the cloth. She positions the spine gauge in the centre and lays the boards against the gauge, taking care to keep them level at head and tail.
And then with your bone folder, you're going to bring up the excess and turn that in nicely over onto the board into that groove area there. Same on the other side. And then we can turn that round and give it a nice rub from the outside. Next, we're going to put our decorative paper on, and we need the same sort of turn in around the outside. So I have prepared a couple of pieces of decorative paper, and you want there to be the turn in top and bottom and on the open edge, the foredge as well. So again, we're going to get some clean waste paper. I'm going to glue out our decorative paper. And again, starting from the middle, and you'll see I'm using the brush in my fist rather than holding it like a sort of paintbrush, and that just helps you to get a nice even spread. Bring the paper onto the cloth by about 2 millimeters, and I want to make sure there's an equal overhang top and bottom, and I'm just gently positioning it so that it's nice and even. And when I'm happy, I'm going to just give that a nice rub down and rub down all the way. And then with our bookbinding scissors, we can cut our corners, and we want to cut those off at 45-degree angle and leaving about a board thickness or so just between where the scissors go and the edge of the board. And then with the bone folder, we're going to bring the paper up over the edge of the board. And then when it comes to the corners, you're just going to tweak the edge of the corner around the board just so that it tapers in slightly. So you're using the tip of the bone folder for that, so that you get a nice tapered corner, which we call a bookbinding corner. And that just comes around the outside of the board like that, and then the last edge gets turned in. And I'm using my fingers and the folder to get it nice and tight around the edge, and then you've got these lovely neat corners. And then we're going to do the same on the other side.
The process of casing in attaches the case to the book block and completes the binding. Mylyn lays the dried out case flat on the table with the outside facing down. She positions the book block on one of the cover boards, ensuring that the squares are correct. She then slips in a sheet of waste paper to protect the book block. Mylyn works briskly to get an even coating of glue on the end paper. First, she applies the adhesive underneath the mull before working in an outwards direction. Working towards the edges, she quickly covers the whole end paper. Care must be taken not to get glue on the edges of the paper of the book block. Note how she adds a little glue to the surface of the case. That will just give the glue a little movement if she needs to adjust the position of the end paper.
Over and just gently positioning it, and then before I apply any pressure, I'm just going to lift that up, see where the end paper is sitting, making sure I'm happy that it's sitting nice and in line, and I am, so I'm going to then just go ahead and rub that down. And I'm being careful in this joint area not to rub too hard because that's wet with adhesive. Instead, what I'm going to do is close the book over, turn that round and rub in that joint area from the outside. Okay, and then we're going to repeat that on the other side. So turning the book round, opening the text block, nice clean bit of waste paper in between the coloured leaves, adhesive on the brush, starting underneath the mole and then on top of the mole, and then we're going to go ahead and glue the rest of the end paper. Making sure you've got a nice thin layer and that you're covering everywhere, you haven't got any dry spots. A little bit on the board in case I need to just move it slightly. Waste paper comes out, holding the text block in place, gently close the cover, and before we apply any pressure, we're just going to open it up, see where it's sitting, move it if we need to, and then rub it down when we're happy.
Mylyn is careful not to pull the board back too far, as this can stretch the end paper and cause it to crease when the book is closed again.
And there we have a finished book. Okay, so now that it's bound, we can see that actually it's starting to bow a little bit, and that's because there's wet adhesive on the materials, and that needs to dry and settle.
It's a good idea to now cut some silicone release paper, or greaseproof. Cereal packet paper also can work well, to insert between the inside boards and the free end paper. This will stop any surplus glue from sticking where it should not, and also help to prevent moisture from the boards penetrating the book block as it dries. Most importantly, the book must be left to dry out properly between wooden boards and under a flat weight. You will now have completed your first bookbinding project, and if you have used the art of the book, you will also have a useful textbook to remind you of what you have learned. If you don't yet have a copy, you can also download each page from our website. You can make a wide variety of books using blank paper to make notebooks, journals, scrapbooks and sketchbooks using the same techniques. You can also begin to explore the wide variety of colourful and decorative materials that make hand bookbinding such a rewarding and exciting craft. The art of the book is just the beginning. I hope you've enjoyed this short video. Our next video explores multi-section binding and is the following chapter of the art of the book. For more information, visit our website, and I look forward to seeing you then.